So we left off last week. We spoke about the Shekhinah being the life force within all of us, the life force within the entire universe. Everything that is alive, everything that exists, it's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a will. There was a will somewhere within the wisdom that creates to create this specific detail, to create this specific reality. And that's the reality we're interacting with on a daily basis, inside of us and outside of us. So he's saying that this force, this Chelek Elokah, is shoichem bekerev kloes v'lev nafshis Yisrael v'hi anikra Shechina b'chol mokim. K'ma she'amri goli lebavel Shechina imam. Goli lebavel Shechina imam. Klal Yisrael goes to Golus. In Bavel, the Shechina comes with. Why does the Shechina come with? Because it's within them. It's in Golus within them, and it comes along. If the Sanhedrin, Shechina ma'ameret klanim miroshi klanim izroi. Why does the Shechina feel our pain? Because if we have pain, the life force within us is in pain. And therefore, it feels all our pain, like it says in the Pasuk, Imo enoichi b'tzora. Lefi, shehi is galas Hashem ha-shoichem b'soich b'nei Yisrael b'kirbam le'olam. Ime olam lo izaz ha-shechina me-koisel ma'arovi, hi ha-koisel shesham shkias ha'oir. So it's saying that the Shechina never moved away from the Koisel ma'arovi, from the western wall. And this wall resembles the Shkias ha'oir. The Shkias ha'oir means when there's darkness in the world, when Klal Yisrael doesn't perceive life in the way that they should, when the mind is in Golus, when perception is in Golus, so then the Shechina still doesn't move from them because it's still giving them life. Even though the life force that it's giving them is not necessarily in its full force, it's still keeping them alive. He's explaining, so even at the time of Shkia, which Shkia resembles when darkness is coming, when a person is losing his touch, he's losing his insight, he's losing his intuitive power, still, the Shechina is never removed from Klal Yisrael. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shoichem b'soich b'nei Yisrael, even when there's tumim b'nei Yisrael. And tumim always means timtum alev, that a person can't be masig the way that he should. Ki nafshis kol Yisrael achizim ikshurim k'beshalsheles k'yedua k'mashenemer Yaakov chevel nachlosoi. The nefoshes of Klal Yisrael are tied up to each other, like in a chain, and they all affect each other. And then it goes from there and it affects the Goyim, it affects the entire human race, and it goes from there and affects the animals, it affects all the other species, it affects the plants, and it affects even the inanimate objects, because the vibration of man is of the highest quality. And therefore, it will permeate all the other versions of life, at kedei kach that we know that when Mashiach is going to come, the animals are going to behave differently, like the Pasuk says, V'gor ze'evim keves, that the animals that are currently torfim, that currently have the nature of eating other animals, will lose that nature, and they will find a way to coexist. But it all starts in man. Man is the leader, man is the driver of the consciousness of the universe, and everything follows man. So the words that he's using here, the pasuk, Yaakov chevel nachlosa, Yaakov is the rope of his nachla. So in order to understand that, we have to get into a little bit how the Oilamists work. Some of you probably have heard the term Abiyah, which stands for Atzilis, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And these are different levels of spiritual life. Many people make the mistake of thinking that Asiya, the lowest level of life, the lowest level of the worlds, of the Oilamists, is the actual physical reality. But the four worlds are four spiritual realms. They're not physical, none of them. The body, the physical body that we inhabit, serves all the worlds. So for example, if a person's spirit is in Asiya, so then his spirit is in Asiya, his body is still the guf. If he's in Bria, now the body is the same body, same guf, but his perception, his reality now went up a level. Now he's perceiving from Bria. And the same thing, any of the other worlds. The guf always remains the same. Now the location where we are is not even in Asiya, because Asiya is the real creation. Asiya is a world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually made, and it's an accurate representation. The spiritual accurately represents the physical. Masha'enken, where we are, which is worlds that are lower than Asiya because they go into the world of the Klipos. The worlds of the Klipos means that your spiritual reality is not an accurate reflection of the physical reality, meaning you don't fully understand what's actually happening, and therefore you're not living in a world. You're living in Olam Hatoi, it's called. Olam Hatoi means a world that doesn't have any rationale, it doesn't fully come together, it doesn't make sense. And as a person evolves spiritually, he goes into Asiya, and Asiya means that the words that he uses to describe reality and the concepts in his mind are real. They actually reflect what's happening. He doesn't live in an imagined state, in an imagined place. But he doesn't necessarily have access to the deeper levels that are causing reality to be the way that it is, because those are the higher realms. So for example, Yetzirah. Yetzirah is the place of the emotions. It's the place where the Ruach is in charge. And when somebody gains a full understanding of the emotional reality and how that works and how he interacts with other people emotionally, and he knows how to bring himself back into emotional balance immediately if he's taken out of balance, so then we would say that he's living in Yetzirah. When a person goes beyond that and he understands his beliefs, he understands his intellectual reality and understands how that's causing his experience and how that's affecting him and other people around him, then we would say that he's entering Bria. And when a person goes even beyond that and he understands the source desires that are causing his beliefs and the source desires that are causing him to manifest the way that he's manifesting, so then we would say that he's living in Atzilus. Now, we shouldn't underestimate the distance between these worlds and how far they are to climb. It might seem simple to us because we can talk about the intellect, we can talk about emotions, we can talk about desire, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's not simply having a discussion about something and therefore you enter that reality. When you enter a reality, it means that you fully understand it, meaning that's the world you live in, that's your base. From there, you're operating. From there, you're looking. Not that simply you're looking into there. You can look at the worlds, you can look at a Yetzirah, you can look at your emotions, but you're not living in there. You don't have enough clarity to live in Yetzirah. And if we want to understand how deep this goes, nobody entered Atzilus since Adam Arishon, including Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah is considered to be standing in Bria, standing in the place of the intellect, where all the different beliefs, all the different understandings of life made sense to him, and he understood how the Machshava works and how it actually manifests. But he didn't enter the world of desire, he looked into it. He looked into it, like the Torah tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu looked into Eretz Yisrael, because Baruch Hu allowed him to see Eretz Yisrael before he entered. And Moshe Rabbeinu asked, no, meaning I want to enter that level. I want to be there, I want to live there, and I want to see life from there. And once he would do that, he would go into a completely different place where the Malachim would have no power over him. And then he would be able to do things that he wasn't able to do from Bria. And he would be able to bring the Gula Shlema. So when we're talking about Atzilus, it's not something that's easy for us to comprehend. Even Asiya is difficult for us to comprehend. But the reason we're talking about the structure is because there is a mini structure in each world, meaning in Asiya, there is the lowest level, which correlates to Asiya. There's a deeper level, which correlates to Yetzirah. There's a deeper level correlating to Bria, and a deeper level correlating to Atzilus. That's all in Asiya. And even in the fake worlds, in the virtual realities that we've devolved into, which are not real, even there is still a taste of Asiya, a taste of Yetzirah, a taste of Bria, and a taste of Atzilus. And that's how we can talk about these things and relate to them, even though we don't fully understand what it means to live in one of those realities. Because if somebody lives there, it means that he has full control, and to him, it's basic knowledge. Just like we have basic knowledge of how to operate our bodies, a person in that level has basic knowledge of how to operate his speech, or how to operate his emotions, or how to operate his intellect and his beliefs and his desires. So it's a very, very deep sulam. It's a very deep ladder that a person could climb. And like I said, for thousands of years, nobody has managed to go into Atzilus. The prophets after Moshe Rabbeinu, which didn't enter, or I think none of them entered Bria either. They were all standing in Yetzirah and looking into Bria. So they stood in Yetzirah, meaning they had gained full control over their emotions. They were completely in charge. And they had the wisdom of understanding how beliefs and how the intellect affects those emotions and affects speech and affects the practical level of the physical. However, they didn't live in the world of Bria. They couldn't enter there. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu is considered to be the highest Navi we've ever had. Nobody went beyond his level. Now, in all these worlds, there are Malachim. And Malachim simply mean forces of nature. How are these Malachim created? So as soon as a child is born and he starts picking up information through his senses, he starts creating malachim. Every thought that a person has, every memory, is a malach. It's not a static memory that's just giving you data saying on this and this date you did that, you ate pizza, you did whatever it was, but it's also alive because it's becoming part of your personality as soon as it happens, and now it's going to decide for you what your future is going to hold. So all these malachim that you've created from birth all the way till now, they're all part of your personality and they're causing you to be who you are. The malachim are having a discussion and they're saying, you know what, this is your next move. This is what you should think now. This is what you should do now. The same thing when you learn. You create malachim of understanding. So for example, I start learning Reb Tzadok, I'm starting to create malachim. His interpretations, his perception, or at least my understanding of his interpretation, these are all malachim. When there are enough malachim, I start getting deeper understanding, right? These malachim are all talking to each other and creating a deeper understanding, creating a big malach. Eventually, there are so many of them, they're sitting here with me and talking to you. They're telling you what I've concluded about what Reb Tzadok thinks. All this is because in my spirit, all these malachim are gathering together and giving me all this information so that I can give it over to you. So these malachim are in all these different worlds and they're creating your reality. So you have malachim that are affecting your emotions, you have malachim that are affecting your beliefs, you have malachim that are affecting your desires, you have malachim that are affecting your practical way of living. These malachim are not always friendly, right? Many times, people tell us things or we think of things that are not friendly. They're not friendly to us, or they're not friendly to the people around us, or they're not friendly to anybody within humanity or reality. So if I think bad about another person, I've created a bad malach. And it's not just in that moment that I've created a bad malach. That bad malach becomes part of my personality. And one day he might say something bad about me, because that's his nature. He says bad things about people. Because the spirit does not differentiate between yourself and other human beings. That differentiation is in your imagination. You think, well, I'm a good guy, but everybody else, they got problems. That is something your imagination can conclude. Your spirit doesn't buy into that. If you believe everybody has problems, well, guess what? You're a human being too. You got problems also. It runs deeper than simply how you decide to look at it. Because 99.99, and I don't know how many nines we got to put there, % of you is identical to the next guy. There's only a tiny sliver of difference, which is in your conscious mind, how you decided to manifest your particular personality. So the structure, the hardware, as well as most of the software is identical. As soon as you tell your spirit that human beings are bad, it means you're bad to a certain degree. And that's because the spirit is always looking at everything like it's a mirror. The spirit comes into this world and doesn't know itself. The only way it's going to figure out who it is by looking around at other people and things and animals and trees and life in general, stars, planets, whatever it is that the person is looking at. And it's going to see itself as a mirror saying, I am something related to all these things. And that's how we see life. That's the lens through which we see life. So when a child's growing up, if a lot of the information coming in is negative, it creates negative malachim. It creates negative energy. Eventually, these malachim become so powerful that they can derail the life of the child. They can cause the child to feel feelings that are not good for him, not good for the people around him, and eventually it can become a bitter, angry adult. We can find those quite easily, I think. And even inside of each one of us, there's a bitter, angry adult that we have to deal with, because we have created, and people created for us, a lot of bad malachim because we weren't conscious. Now, these bad malachim are called Shi and Dalet. Shi and Dalet is a mazik. It's a koyach, it's a spiritual koyach that has been recorded within your personality, that when it acts out, it's causing damage to the people around you and to yourself. But Shi and Dalets are not necessarily always negative. Shi and Dalets could also be your friends. For example, if you learn how to ride a bike, the one that's riding the bike for you after you've learned how to ride the bike is a Shi and Dalet. What is it? It's a mental recording, it's a spiritual recording of certain nerve movements and muscle movements and a certain way of keeping your balance so that you can stay on the bike. Every time you ride the bike, you activate that force and you tell him, now ride the bike for me. In the meantime, you're thinking about whatever you're thinking about. You're not necessarily focused on driving the bike because there's already a spiritual recording that knows how to ride the bike and it's riding the bike for you. And the same goes for almost everything we do. If we eat the same breakfast every morning, we've created a ritual, we've created a malach, we've created a recording of how this procedure works, how this ritual is going to go down, and we keep replaying it. We just hit the play button and now it's going to do whatever it needs to do. We only think when we hit a spot where we're like, okay, what do I do now? This I haven't recorded before. And then the intelligence comes in and says, you know what, at this point, this is what you need to do. So we have these spiritual forces in all the worlds, from the top to the bottom. And the reason we're in such a low world, the reason we've devolved into such a low reality is because when there's pain, when something is broken, the spirit has to go down all the way to where the problem is in order to fix it. If it's going to stay up top and the problem is inside of the being at a lower level than the spiritual level where the spirit resides, then the damage is not healable. The spirit is not looking at that place. It's, for example, like if you have a leak in your house and the plumber has to come in and open the sheetrock and open the wall, open all kinds of different things that have nothing to do with plumbing. But that's the only way you're going to get to the plumbing and be able to resolve your issues. So you always have to open up all the way to the area of the problem. So when Adam Rishon was in Atzilus, but after the Chet, things changed and then now there was a problem in Asiya. So now society has to devolve in all the way down to Asiya, and we have to find ways to coexist at the level of Asiya. When we can all coexist at the level of Asiya, we can all proceed to the level of Yetzirah. If we can coexist there, if people can look out for each other emotionally, if we can know the right things to say to help each other emotionally, so then we evolve to Bria, and we can really start understanding what life means and how to go about it and why it was created and what's the best way to manifest the potential of life. If we learn to coexist in Bria, we can move on to Atzilus, which is called Gan Eden, which is a place where people actually know how to look out for each other on all the spiritual levels. So there's never any frustration, there's never any arguments or wars or craziness. All the individuals are running the same software and trying to help each other to achieve their potential. And that is going to be the perfect society that we're all looking forward to. So a big part of this job is cleaning out all these ghosts, all these Shi and Dalets that were created over time that are basically causing us to act the way that we act. So there's two ways of doing tshuva with these malachim. One way of doing tshuva with these malachim is that you, what's called killing them, eliminating them, meaning your intelligence now knows that this thought, this belief, this emotion is no good, and therefore as soon as it starts coming into your system, it gets eliminated. Eventually it'll stop coming, because every spiritual force, every spiritual entity needs food in order to exist. And the food of existence is manifestation. And that's why it's always trying to manifest. It's trying to come in and come out in words or in action, because that's going to give it life. That's going to refresh your relationship with it. If you don't let that happen, eventually it dies because it doesn't have food, you're not feeding it, and then it gets forgotten from your consciousness and it stops bothering you. The other way is called turning it over, lahafcha, which means that you actually can use these forces for your benefit. And that takes a tremendous amount of wisdom. That was the wisdom that Shlomo HaMelech was into when he was working with Ashmedai. There's all these different stories, because Ashmedai is the king of the Shein Dalets. The king of the Shein Dalets is the imagination. The imagination creates them. And that's why Ashmedai stands for Age Dummy, the fire within my blood. And Ashmedai, the word actually means I will annihilate myself. Yeah, and which means that there is a recording within that person that's not his friend, that's not good for him. And there's actually a point while Shlomo HaMelech was trying to overcome Ashmedai, where Ashmedai was Shlomo HaMelech. Right? He kicked him off his throne, and the imagination took over, and some funny things happened. So that Shlomo HaMelech's goal was to take over the imagination, to take over the koyach of the shaidim, and to use them for good purposes, which he did, but he never actually completed the job. We're still waiting for somebody to go in there and do that and finalize it. And actually the Torah, the purpose of the Torah is to allow our imagination to be in charge of the shaidim. That's the goal, because once that happens, then the seichel can talk to us. As long as that doesn't happen, the shaidim are standing in the way of us perceiving the seichel, of us perceiving what's really going on, because we have all these different recordings that are not really serving us, and they're just confusing us. And so even when we learn, even when we daven, everything we do, sometimes we're feeding the wrong side, because sometimes the thing that's causing us to do whatever it is we're doing is not our friend, is not there to help us. And when you're acting that out, you're manifesting him, you're giving him power, you're giving him food. So that's why it takes a certain das to be mavdil, to be mavchin ben or lechoshech, to know what's really within your best interest and what's not. But what we need to be even more careful with, what's done is done, is going forward. Every time we speak, we're creating spiritual entities. Speech is extremely powerful. We cannot underestimate this. This is a power that creates our entire spiritual being. And even though words are weak in their own sense, because words themselves don't really represent reality, right? We speak about water, we speak about a human being. It's not, when we say the word water, there's no water there. It's just bringing up a concept in our mind. And therefore words can be tricky. When it comes to the spiritual reality, words, sometimes you can say statements that seem opposite just by looking at the words, but if you understand the inner dimension they're pointing to, you'll see that both of the statements actually make sense, because words are tricky like that, and they have different meanings in different contexts. And the whole Torah is written like that, with mishalim and allegories of what the real meaning is. Obviously, the Torah is not just telling us history, it's not just telling us stories. There is a deeper meaning to everything that's written in the Torah, and that's through the interpretation of words and understanding how language works, so that we can understand that the whole world, not just the words in the Torah, everything that exists is a mashal, is telling us something. The fact that there's trees, the fact that we eat fruit from the trees, the fact that there are animals, the fact that we eat children of animals, we eat eggs, we eat chickens, all these different things, and the nature of these animals, and what they do and what they don't do and how they act. All this is a language that Shlomo HaMelech understood. And that's what gave him insight into the ultimate goal of the human purpose, because all these different energies, all these different forces are included within man. So everything you see outside of yourself, there's a reason you see it as a mirror, because it is. It's telling you something about you, but you need to understand the context of what it's saying. You need to understand it in a way that doesn't hurt you. And many, many people who practice religion, they end up eating religion in a way that it could become a samamovis. Like it says, tzadikim yelchibam, they'll create malachim with this text. If a poshim yikashlibam, they're going to create shaidim with the same text. And that's because of how they set up, and whether they're looking for the truth and whether they're kind. The Torah tests you on many different levels before it reveals the truth to you. But these energies, these forces, specifically the negative ones, as they become more powerful, if a person feeds a certain energy over and over and over again, this can be the beginning, this can be the source of all kinds of spiritual illness. And when I say spiritual illness, I'm simply including emotional illness, Like, for example, OCD is a very common manifestation. Like the Chazal call it kili kafo shed, right? Somebody is forced by a spiritual force to do something that makes no sense. He's closing the door multiple times, even though he knows it's closed already and it's locked and everything's fine, but something inside of him is driving him. And all these come from these negative entities inside of us that are not our friends. So as soon as we believe something that's not good for us, that belief can start creating now emotional turbulence, emotional negative forces that can gang up on the person and cause them all kinds of distress. So emotional disease, intellectual disease. Intellectual disease is usually not so toxic to the person carrying, although it locks them out of understanding life and it locks them out from the truth, but maybe his body feels fine. But it's extremely dangerous for the people around him because the things he says and the way he goes about life is going to create negativity in the people around him because he's obviously not on the right path. So all these different diseases we can include in spiritual disease because it's all diseases in what's motivating us and what's driving us in our understanding and our perception. All these diseases can be healed through the Torah by understanding what the truth is. Because disease is built on a lie. Even physical disease, I think today science is arriving to that conclusion more and more, that there's a connection between the spirit and physical disease. So if a person is irritating a certain part of his body by believing something that he shouldn't believe, and thinking something he shouldn't think, or feeling something he shouldn't feel, all these things that are toxic to the individual, eventually that body part that correlates to that belief, that area that's been hit by this continuous stream of negative energy, of negative spiritual energy, becomes physically impaired, becomes physically sick, and it doesn't do its function anymore. And that's because everything goes back to the mind, and every particle in our body was created by us, was created by the body itself, by the intelligence inside the body. And it was created based on the energy that the body is vibrating and the thoughts that the body is having. And therefore, that particle has a specific nature. It has the nature of the person that's creating it. So when we speak, it takes a very, very deep commitment to make sure that you don't create negative forces within the people around you. Doesn't matter how bad you feel, what your mood is that day, or what's going on in your life, and you say logically, I'm justified to be angry. Logically, I'm doing nothing wrong. This makes sense. Everybody does it like that. All that is irrelevant. The reality is that if you scream at that child, if you make that statement that you shouldn't make, if you call somebody a loser, or you call them any different name that has a negative connotation, you are creating an enemy, a malach that hates you and hates that person, within that person, unless that person is of extreme spiritual awareness and he knows how to protect himself from the effect of what you're saying. All the forces, all the words, all the actions that cause spiritual development within another person is called kishuf. So kishuf is the avoida of creating shaidim. So if we want to manipulate somebody, if you want to control somebody, if you want to dominate somebody, you use your words to create entities within that person that are going to force him to do your will. And that's kishuf. That's a type of mind control. And we all do it. We all do it. We're just not aware of what we're doing. So it doesn't matter what the relationship is between you and that person, whether it's a family member, it's an associate at work, it's an employee, it's a boss, it's a wife, it's a child. When we speak and we try to dominate somebody else, we try to take away their ability to control their own destiny by giving them ideas, beliefs, feelings, compliments, or the other way around. All this is creating spiritual forces that are going to drive that person from that day forward. Because it's going to, whatever it is that you said is going to become part of their personality, part of their experience, part of their spirit. And going forward, unbeknownst to them, their thoughts are not going to originate with a discussion with all these negative forces. And sometimes these negative forces can get deeply involved in the child's life, and they can completely derail whatever success that child was trying to achieve, because suddenly he feels like he can't do it, there's no confidence, he feels inferior, he feels like he's never going to make it. And these seeds were planted by another human being usually. Somebody said that, somebody made that statement, somebody made that child feel that way. And then when life plays out, these entities, these forces have a big effect. But the biggest effect, maybe even bigger than the effect that we have in this world from these entities, is the effect that comes after this world. Because in this world, while we're alive, we get to define these spiritual entities, we get to create them. We get to say what we say, we get to think what we think, and we're defining spiritual entities as we go. As soon as we leave the body, the relationship changes. Suddenly, you don't define these spiritual entities, they define you. You've lost your power. You don't have the ability to manifest. But whatever you already did, all these malachim that you've created, all these experiences that happened to you, now become extremely relevant, because this is all you got. This is you. This is you're a blank disc, you're an open spirit, you're born clean, and you accumulated, and you accumulated, and you accumulated, day after day. Every day goes in, close the file, that's the day. Person sleeps, the mind defragments, reprograms, and makes sure that all the information is available for the morning. The morning you wake up fresh, yesterday's day is already part of your spirit. You don't even have to think about it twice. Everything that happened yesterday is already affecting you today and tomorrow. So this is how life works. Now the accumulation of all these files, let's say you have 30 days in the month, now we put all those 30 days into a nice booklet, and that's that month, that year, it gets tagged, it's got your name on it, that's you. Then we got 12 of those, we got a year. Then we got 70, 80, 90 of those, we got a lifetime. And that's you. That's what you manifested in this life. That's what you did. That's what you created. And to that, you're going to have infinity of figuring out what that did to the people around you, what the people around you did with that, and how that continues to affect life for eternity, because it never stops. So chaz v'sholem, a person says a bad word to another person, he got him, he said the right words, there was a good emotional reaction, exactly as he was trying to do, and now that person is pissed. Perfect, success. Now we got this negative energy spinning. What's going to happen? He goes home. Dinner's not ready. Boom. Now his wife is getting it. Okay, we got it done. Now the kids, they're not going to go to sleep in the same fashion they usually do. There's going to be some commotion. There's going to be drama. Now you ruined this kid's life also. Now that the kid's going to go to school the next day, didn't sleep enough, didn't sleep good, arguing with his friends, all that for that one word that you said. Wow, beautiful. What a wonderful achievement. So it's something that we really need to be aware of, because it might not seem as real to us as taking a knife and sticking it in somebody's gut, but the reality is it's more real. It's worse. It lives much longer. A knife in the body will heal within a few weeks, months. Hopefully you don't ruin one of his organs, but the person will recover, he'll be fine. The spiritual damage that can be done with one word can reverberate and reverberate and reverberate and reverberate for eternity. And that's the power of the Spirit. That's the power of speaking. That's why David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Mi ha'isha chofetz chayim oyev yomim liras tov. You want life? You want good? Nitzoy lishoncho me'ro. Watch your tongue from saying evil. Because you're creating, in the spiritual, you're creating something that is going to be you. You're defining yourself. And it's going to be within you, and it's going to be outside of you. It has a life of its own. The best thing to do in a bad mood is just to be quiet. Just to be quiet. Unless you have a friend that can help you get out of it, just hold it all in. It might not feel good, might not feel right, but when you release that anger, you're feeding somebody you shouldn't be feeding, and you're creating within the people you love the enemy that might ruin their lives. and their children's, and their grandchildren's, and who knows how far it goes. This is the ultimate war, that the spiritual war that we're fighting. This is the war that Avraham Avinu fought. This is the reason why people before the Dor HaMabul became so evil, because they were creating evil within each other, just trying to fulfill their own desires. They were creating evil within each other, until eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that he regrets creating man. Why? He says, all day the Yetzer is creating Ra, the Yetzer of the Machshavas of the heart. How does that happen? So we know we have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Ra. A Yetzer Tov, the Lashon Yetzer is the Lashon of Tzir. Somebody in there is drawing images, right? Your imagination is creating pictures. There is a force within you which contains all the Malachim, all the ones who love you and care about you, that were created kindly, that were created by loving parents, that were created by people who gave you emotional support and cared about you. All these angels want to create a good life for you. So how do they do that? By being your Yetzer Tov. By being Mitzayer, good images in your mind that you can manifest, that you can create in order for your life to be good. The Yetzer Ra is the exact opposite. His pictures are always bad. Everything is no good. It's never good enough. Every problem is bigger than it seems. Everything has drama. And that's the power of the Yetzer Ra. So what happened at the time of the Mabul was that people were so nasty to each other that the whole day the only images they could create in their mind was evil. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to erase man. Right? With the flood, I'm going to erase man. How does erasing man help if his heart is evil? Right? He's still going to be born, still going to have an evil heart, and he's going to continue doing evil. But no, the evil was created by those people. So if we'll erase the people, we'll erase those habits, we'll erase those recordings, those beliefs, those ways of living, then man has a chance. Then he can start over. Then he has the ability to create Yetzerim Tovim, to create better images. His imagination could work on a deeper level.
Still left over some.
Well, there's plenty, yeah, because it exists in the physical level also. Meaning, when you breathe out, you're breathing out in there a lot of information that has an effect on the people that are going to breathe that air in. And this is called the Havolim, right? Of Koheles, where he speaks about the Havolim Hakel Hovel, because there's different types of Avolim, and these Avolim get created by man. So man is like a converter of energy. He breathes in a certain type of energy, and he breathes out a certain type of energy. A good man is always converting energy to good. So whatever is coming in, whether it's good or bad, and this is part of the concept of the Tikkun Neshamas that the Baal Shem Tov is working with, and the tzaddikim of his generation, that whatever comes up in your mind is a spiritual force, is a spiritual entity, and it's your job to guide it to the truth, to guide it to something good. And that's how you're Mesaken Neshamas. So the whole challenge that we have today is that we're so steeped in the lie, we're so steeped in what's fake, we're so steeped in the imagination that we don't know where to start, we don't know how to climb out. We don't have the basic principles of how the truth works and what's real and what's not real, so we can't differentiate. Sometimes we can't differentiate between a Shin Daled and a Malach. Somebody wants to help you and somebody wants to hurt you. But that's ultimately that's the job of man. Like in the Sefer Yetzirah it says the three Amas, the three main letters, are Aleph, Mem, Shin. And there's different interpretations of it. The Pashtus is that it's, right, like the Sefer Yetzirah says, it's the three different elements. It's the water, it's the fire, and it's the air. But another way of reading it is the Mem stands for Malach, the Aleph stands for Adam, and the Shin stands for Shin Dalet. So the Adam is in the middle, choosing between the Malach and the Shin Dalet. That's his job, to be Mevader, right? The Birurim, V'kulam b'chokhma is Biriru. Everything gets Mevirer according to Chokhmah, meaning when the person has wisdom, the person has Chokhmah, now his mind has the tools to be Mevarer Birurim. And that's why we say Atachoin Antoni by Atachoinen, which is the mokum that we're davening for Das and Bina and Haskel, because that's what gives us the power to be Mavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil. If we don't have Das, Chazal say Havdalah minayin. How are you going to make Havdalah if you don't have das? If you don't understand what's good for you and what's bad for you, if you don't understand the difference between what's real and what's imagined, how are you going to be able to tell the difference between a malach and a Shin Dalet? How are you going to be able to know what you're allowed to manifest and which ones you should keep in there? So now that we know all this, we can relate a little bit to this concept of Yaakov Chevel Nachlosoi. All these worlds, all these realities, are in the shape of a man, the shape of a body. So the physical body, Mipsor Echze Leka, represents these different worlds, these different realities. We spoke about this a little bit last week, that the mind represents the highest level within man. That's where the neshama has its intelligence. The heart represents the one that chooses. It's in a constant war. And in this instance, we can say that the mind represents the malachim, right? The heart represents the adam that's choosing. And the kaveh, the liver, represents the shaidim. Because that's the area we have the least understanding, and that's where the impulses come from, and anger comes from, and different instincts that are not necessarily good for us come out of the liver. And it has a whole group over there helping it out, the Tchoil and the Mora and all these different things. If somebody is interested, there's a long Raya Mehemna in Parshas Pinchas. If you have a Zohar, you can look it up. It speaks a lot about some of the things we spoke last week about, and some of the things we mentioned this week. It could be interesting just to see the Lashon inside. So, Yaakov Chevel Nachlosoi means that from Atzilus all the way down to Asiya is in the shape of a body, but it's not a physical body, it's a conceptual body, it's a spiritual body. And from this conceptual body, from this spiritual body, come neshamas. So a neshama of Asiya, he's a worker, he's a physical guy, he's a guy that is practically understands things the way that they are in the physical world. As soon as you start talking to him about emotions, about intellect, he falls asleep. It's not his, he doesn't have that in his shoyrish, it doesn't belong to him. The same goes for Yitzira, emotional people. The neshama comes from there. The Bria, the intellectual people, and the Atzilus is the people of pure Ratzon, the people that have God's grace in them, and no matter what happens to them or what situation they're in, they have a different way about life. They're floating above it. They're not really involved in it. So if a neshama is from somewhere, it doesn't mean that person resides there. Like we said before, even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go into Atzilus. So how can we say that neshamas today are from Atzilus? Because the neshama, when it comes from somewhere, that's your shoyrish. But like we spoke about last week, just because your shoyrish is at a very high level, just because your intelligence comes from a very deep place, doesn't mean that the feed that you're getting is clear and it's clean. So somebody could be in a neshama of Atzilus or Bria or Yitzir or Asiya, and then they could be in a non-existent universe created by the imagination. So they're not even in Asiya, even though they have a tremendous neshama. But because they have such a high neshama, they're going to feel even more uncomfortable than the other guy. So a guy that's from Asiya and he's living in a reality that's not real, he hardly feels the difference. On a practical level, he makes it work. He can find his food, he can do his job, he can build his house. He doesn't see a problem. But the guy from Yitzira, he feels a little bit emotionally out of place. Something is not right. He's not feeling the energy that he needs in order to survive, because his neshama is from Yitzira. He needs that. The guy from Bria feels even more out of place because the beliefs don't make any sense to him. There's no sense in what he's doing. He doesn't feel meaning. He doesn't feel that life has any purpose because he needs that. This is part of his being. This is his shoyrish. This is what his intelligence is all about. And the one from Atzilus is completely lost, right? He belongs in an environment where he's a king. He deserves to be catered to on the physical level, on the emotional level, and on the intellectual level. And instead, he's just in this madhouse where everybody's doing whatever they want, and there's no sense, there's no meaning, there's no understanding. So a neshama of Atzilus can be in extreme despair. But a neshama of Atzilus has a special protection because it comes from Atzilus. It has a special rotzen, it has a special connection to life, so that even if it's in extreme despair, it doesn't get lost. It doesn't allow that to overtake it. It has a special protection from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Zohar speaks about it in Parshas Mishpatim. It talks about the different neshamas, the different gilgulim. So it says that there's certain neshamas that come from this high place, from Atzilus, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not allow them to go into to the Galus the way that others are, because they are the purpose of life. They're the reason we're all here. So we're not going to let the lower levels kill their experience, so to speak, completely. So they come down, and usually they come down in groups. They come down to fix life, to help other people, to guide them. But they're not involved in the day-to-day grind the way that most people are. So when we talk about Klal Yisrael, we're talking about this entire being. The being that includes all the 4 levels. And this is called Klal Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael. And Knesset Yisrael has what the Torah calls Einei Oeda, the eyes of the people. So some people are the eyes, and some people are the brain, and some people are the heart, and some people are the hands, and some people are the legs. And that all together, you have a society that can serve all the different functions that the human being needs, so that it can be supported emotionally, it can be supported physically, it can be supported intellectually, and it can be supported so that the desire, the Ratzon Eloki, to create life, the divine desire that he wants in this world could manifest, it could come out, and we can live it. So that's what it means, Yaakov Chevel Nachloser, like a rope, that all the neshamas are tied to these neshamas in Atzilus, and from there the life comes in. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends new life to Klal Yisrael, the neshamas of Atzilus will feel that life first. They will communicate to the neshamas of Bria. The neshamas of Bria will understand what they're saying and will appreciate the new intellectual clarity that they received. And then from there, these beliefs can be clarified to the people in Yetzirah, so their emotional well-being is brought back into balance. And then the people of Yetzirah can relate to the people of Asiya, so that the practical life can be set up in a proper manner, so that we can coexist emotionally and intellectually and spiritually. That's the Chevel. Yaakov Chevel Nachlosai. So he's saying now, Nefoshes Kol Yisrael Achuzim Ikshurim Keveshalsheles, right? They're all tied up like a chain. Ki Yidiyam Hashem Yaakov Chevel Nachlosai. Ad שיסגל אור אלוקה בהלם והסתר וצמצם גודל, אין נעלה מכל לב איש ישראל אף הפוכה שבפחוסים. יש בחלק חיים אשר חולק להשם מחלק אלוקה ממעל. So it says, even the one, the neshama that's from the lowest level in Asiya, because of this chain, because of this relationship that he has, so he is part of the divine presence. He's part of the divine light. Just like we would say that even in the toe of a man, his spirit still resides in his toe, right? His toe is alive, even though it's just a toe, and it can't really think much, and it can't really do much, and it doesn't really influence the life of that organism as much as some of the other organs, but it's still part of that life. It's still part of that being. So the same way, even the lowest neshamas in Klal Yisrael are part of the being, are part of the Chelek Hashem, the Chelek Elokah Mimal. V'nikra b'chol mokem hashchina b'loshen nekeva, ki b'madregas em. Canal. So the Shekhinah is like the mother. The mother is the manifestation. The father brings the seed, and the mother manifests the seed. The mother creates life. So the Shekhinah is the life force within the manifested reality that creates life, that continuously creates life, creates people, creates the reality that we live in. V'hainu. כי באמס עצם אור השם גודל מאוד ואפשר ליסמוסיק ללב בני אדם כלל. The truth is that the light of creation, just like the wisdom of creation, if we try to perceive the wisdom of creation in its original format, it's way beyond the human perception. The human being cannot handle it. So the light, the life force within that wisdom that makes that wisdom manifest is beyond that even, and a person cannot relate to it at all. כמו שנאמר, a person cannot be in his physical body and perceive the life force that's giving him life. It's a contradiction. This unmanifested portion, this human potential that we can't really relate to because we don't know its structure, because it's beyond us, that's called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the unmanifest, the potential, which is there, but we can't relate to it, it gives life to the manifest. It creates it. So when we go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're going to the unmanifest, and we want to manifest some new life, some new understanding, some new feeling, some new relationship from somewhere, from the potential of man, bring it out into the reality. So we're bringing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the Shekhinah. We're feeding the Shekhinah. And this happens every time that a person digs into the Al-Manifest. He digs, he wants to go higher spiritually, he wants to understand more. So yesterday he didn't understand something, it was Al-Manifest for him, it was not part of the Shekhinah yet, it didn't exist. And now he brought it down, he brought it out. Like you'll find many times Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says that he wants to say this word, he wants to say the Dvar Torah, because he wants to be Megale to the Shekhinah. Meaning he wants to manifest it so that it exists in actual life. It doesn't just exist in potential. As long as something is within our minds, it's in a midway between potential and reality. And the Torah is very into manifesting all the way. So you say something or do something with it, not just think. So the thinking is how you organize yourself before you're going to manifest. And then when you make that commitment, you bring it out in words or you bring it out in action. And that actually creates, that gives this reality power. V'zei Torah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Haruas Kedusha B'chol Mukoim, Havdalah Shenivdal Mibnei Adam. So it's called HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kadosh. Why do we call him Kadosh? Because he's Nivdal, he's beyond us. He's above us. He's something more than we are. And therefore we call him Kadosh. We can't relate. But it's important to realize that the word Kadosh has a specific meaning. Today, Kedushas, I think a lot of the interpretations that people have of the word Kedusha originates in other religions, not necessarily in ours, and a strong influence is the Christian religion, where people think that Kedusha means that you're removed from life, you don't live, you don't enjoy life. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because we know that the holiest day in the week, Shabbos, the Torah says, V'karosel Shabbos oineg. Right? You should have pleasure on Shabbos, because Kedusha is related to two things in the Zohar. There's Kedusha that's called Kodesh Ilah. Kodesh Ilah is Chachma. So real Kedusha is Chachma, wisdom. When a person knows how to live, then he's considered a Kodesh. He doesn't create challenges within his experience. And the second one is Chesed. So a person is considered to be a Kadosh if he has the midah of Chesed. And the reason we call HaKadosh Baruch Hu a Kadosh, one of the reasons, is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the midas harachamim that a person could potentially attain. If a person attains the midas harachamim the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended for us in our potential, then we would say that he's Dovik in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why the 13 midas of Hashem, Kel, Rachum, V'chanun, Erech Hapayim, V'rav Chesed, they relate to our relationship with Hashem, meaning we want to bring those midas into ourselves, and then we'll be considered to have dveikus, meaning we're Dovik in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're Dovik into a reality of Chesed and Rachamim, and therefore our lives start taking on a completely different meaning, and this helps us so that we can eliminate all these koiches atuma from all the different worlds inside of us and in the people around us, so that eventually we can unite and we can be zoche to the Gila Shleima, which we should see b'meira b'yameinu.
Amen. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go to Atzilus. The Dvar says by Rabbi Akiva before went into the Pardes.
Pardes is Yitzira, is the Olam HaYitzira. And because, right, and the reason was that Chazal tell us that the three of them went in and they didn't make it out in peace. And Rabbi Akiva nichnas b'sholem v'yotze b'sholem, and that's the real key, because there are all kinds of malachim a person will find once he tries to clean up his emotional state, right? And there's a lot of negativity there. There's a lot of powerful forces. We can't even imagine how powerful they are because we're in such a low state. It's the equivalent of being connected to a very low voltage line. So the higher you go up into the worlds, as you go from Asiyah to Yetzirah, Yetzirah to Bria, you're going into higher voltage. And you shouldn't go into higher voltage if there's still negativity, if there's still shaidim around, because if you give them that voltage, they become extremely dangerous. And that's why there needs to be cleanliness, there needs to be clarity before we can enter into these different realms. The higher we go, the more power we give. And the voltage in Atzilus is so strong that when Klal Yisrael had a glimpse of it by Matan Torah, Parchon Ishmasim, they couldn't handle it. So when Rabbi Akiva was Nichnas B'Shalom V'Yatzu B'Shalom, it means that he kept that as his guide. If this Malach is Shalom, then he's my friend, then I'll talk to him. If this Malach is not Shalom, regardless of what he's trying to tell me, he's out. I'm not going. And that key is what got him through so that they couldn't throw him off. Even by Moshe and also by Rabbi Akiva, we see that the Malachim said by Rabbi Akiva that they want to kick him, they want to take care of him. Basically, that he should end up like the other three. And like HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, he has a place here. And the reason he has a place is because he was holding on to Shalom. Shalom is the letter Shem Loi, right? He has a Shem. And which Shem does he have? Shalom is Gematria, Shmi Havaya. And that's because Shalom is one of the names of Hashem. And the Chazal tell us, Lemotza Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kli Machzik Brocha Yisrael Ela Shalom. And that's the ultimate result of Birchas Kehanim. The Kehanim represent the Midas HaChesed. That through the Midas HaChesed that the Kehanim raise in the world, we are Zoichet to V'yosem L'chol Shalom, so that we can all find peace. And then through peace, we can rise, we can attain higher voltage, and we can handle it properly so that we don't fall out of balance.
Their level, they only got to Yitzir, what are you saying?
The Yitzira, that we had Nevi'im in Yitzira, and these people were not Nevi'im. So it's actually a Chiddush that they were in Yitzira. But the Pardes is called Yitzira, yeah. And that's the certain Malachim, there's Metatron and Bria, and there's Sandalphon in Yitzira. And all these are different forces and energies that people can relate to and interact with.
How did you define Kedusha again?
Kodesh law is Chochmah, wisdom. So a person living according to the wisdom of life is called a Kodesh. And the lower level of Kedusha is Chesed. Because, do you know the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life with the Kaser Chochmah Bina, with all the spheres going down? So the right-hand side is Kodesh. The left-hand side is Gvura. And the middle is the goal. The middle is the reality that we're trying to build. So as we pull towards Kedusha, as we pull towards the right, more Chesed, more Chochmah, the middle becomes stabilized. If we pull towards the left, then the whole thing could lose balance.
When you're calling the right side Kodesh, you call the left side what?
Chol.
Chol? And the middle, what do you call it?
The middle is a combination of a proper balance. But the Kodesh means that you're pulling everything, right? The middle doesn't really have an existence. The middle is just a point where you find balance between the two sides. So when you're pulling towards the Yamin, you're pulling towards Kodesh. When you're pulling towards small, you're pulling towards Chol. That's why Chazal say that the Torah could be a Samachaim or a Samamoves. Lema'iminim ba Samachaim, lemasmilim ba Samamoves. So meaning if you pull to the left with your Torah and you don't realize that it's a Torah's Chesed, like we say by Eshes Chayil, Pia Pascha b'Chochma, when she opens her mouth with Chochma, the Torah's Chesed al-Eshoina, then the Torah becomes Chesed.
And you could call the middle Shalom.
What?
You could call the middle Shalom.
You can call the middle Shalom. If the balance is right. Sometimes it's not Shalom. Depends where the middle is. That's the Shalom and Milchama is the two sides. Milchama. So it says Lev benefesh kemelech b'milchama. Right? The heart is always at war. So the heart is the middle, but usually it's not in Shalom. Only if you've gotten to a place of Kodesh where the Chesed and the Chochmah are really dominating, then there's Shalom in the middle. Oise Shalom b'mroima v'yase Shalom aleinu.
Would you say the heart is a thinking organ?
The heart is involved very deeply in thinking, even though the cells in the heart don't think for themselves necessarily, but the balance and the way the heart feels is very much affected by the emotions, and therefore the heart is considered to be the machriya when it comes to emotions, because it tells you how you feel about it. It tells you if you're attracted to a reality or it's pushing you away, or you're disgusted by it, or whatever it might be. So the heart is very deeply involved in thinking. It has a very big place in the brain and how the brain functions. It's the first thing the brain is there to protect, really.
What does the Gemara mean when it says The three things Shadim are like.
Right. So the three things that are that they're like Bnei Adam is that they eat and they have period virivia, meaning that they procreate, one creates another, and they die. Those are the three things that are like Bnei Adam, and it happens to be, those are also the three things where a behemoth is like a Ben Adam. Because the spirit within a behemoth is considered to be a Shin Dalit, especially if it's a Shor Nagach, which then there's a negative force, a mazik, or a neshama of a rasha, that's animating that animal, and it wants to hurt. It has anger, and that's a mazik. That's a Shin Dalit that's not good for humanity. But a shar that's just doing his job, he's a friendly Shin Dalit. There's friendly Shin Dalits everywhere. That's what makes the world go round.
So what does it mean they eat?
So they eat, like we said before, they need energy or they expire. So if you're not going to give them manifestation, they're going to expire. Period virivia means that now that it's inside of you, it's going to talk to the others and create conclusions. And they die means that if you don't feed them, they disappear. We're good?